Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pasyatya Desha Tarine Narayanang Namaskrutyang Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So continuing on the 15th chapter, the Pandavas retired timely, and Arjuna replying to the inquiry of Maharaj Yudhishthir, and in particular, what was the state of affairs of the residents of Dwarika. So he broke the news that all the residents of the Dwarika, they were very much intoxicated, and they all fought amongst themselves, and they killed each other. So this was a very special arrangement made by the Lord. Actually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sometimes people kill one another, and at some other times they protect one another. And in this, what was mentioned was discretion is better part of valor. And one must know how to discriminate between actions which may be pleasing to the Lord and those which may not be pleasing to the Lord. So I sort of gave a homework. Has anybody attempted? किया किसी ने? Attempt किया? This phrase, this statement, that Prabhupada uses this many places, that discretion is better part of valor. याद है? भूल गए? बोला था ना आप लोग को, पता करिएगा व्हाट इज दिस मीन. चलिए आज फिर रिपीट कर देते हैं. We will discuss it tomorrow. Find out what does it mean that discretion is better part of valor. Okay, going forward. जलौकसं जले यद्वान् महन्तो वदन्ति अनीशः अनीशः दुर्बलं बलिनो राजन महन्तो बलिनो मीतः एवं बलिष्ठैर्यदुभिर् महद्भिरितरन् विभु यादुन्यदुभिर् अन्योन्यं भूभारन् sanjaharjah. O king, as in the ocean, the bigger and stronger aquatics swallow up the smaller and weaker ones. So also the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to lighten the burden of the earth, has engaged the stronger yadus to kill the weaker, and the bigger yadu to kill the smaller. This is another very bewildering pastime of the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, Janma karma cha me divyam. So Krishna created such a situation where the Yadukul, the dynasty coming from Krishna himself, they killed each other. There's a huge number. What was the number of the lineage of Krishna's descendants? We read that. Okay, I remember Sonika said that. But anyone else who remember? Manini Mataji remembers. Dayashi Prabhu, what was the count?
Prabhuji, 1 crore, 1 crore.
Yes, I will take it. 10 million is 1 crore. The exact figure was, it was 10 million. 10 million. 10 millions were his family members. And other cousins, so many. So Krishna arranged that all of them fought amongst each other and killed each other. In the material world, the struggle for existence and survival of the fittest are lost because in the material world, there is disparity between conditioned souls due to everyone's desire to lord it over the material resources. This very mentality of lording it over the material nature is the root cause of conditioned life. And to give facility to such imitation lords, the illusionary energy of the Lord has created a disparity between conditioned living beings by creating the stronger and the weaker in every species of life. The mentality of lording it over the material nature and the creation has naturally created a disparity. And therefore, the law of struggle for existence in the spiritual world, there is no such disparity, nor there is such a struggle for existence. In the spiritual world, there is no struggle for existence because everyone there exists eternally. There is no disparity because everyone wants to render service to the Supreme Lord, and no one wants to imitate the Lord in becoming the beneficiary. The Lord, being the creator of everything, including the living beings, factually is the proprietor and enjoyer of everything that be. But in the material world, by the spell of Maya or illusion, this eternal relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is forgotten. And so the living being is conditioned on the law of struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. So Prabhupada is in this purport mentioning that struggle and conflict and killing of each other in material existence is so very natural. Why? Because everyone wants to take the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to become the enjoyer. Desha kala yuktani hrida tapa upasamani cha haranti smaratas chittam govinda abhitani me. Now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. So Arjuna is now focusing his attention on the instructions that Krishna gave him. What is the instruction that Krishna gave him? It is in the form of Bhagavad Gita. Herein Arjuna refers to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita which were imparted to him by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Lord left behind him the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, not for the benefit of Arjuna alone, but also for all times and in all lands. The Bhagavad Gita, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. It is nicely presented by the Lord himself for all who have very little time to go through the vast Vedic literatures like the Upanishad, Puranas and Vedanta Sutra. It is put within the study of great historical epic Mahabharata, which was specially prepared for the less intelligent class, namely the women, the laborers and those who are worthless descendants of the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and higher sections of the Vaishyas. The problem which arose in the heart of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was solved by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Again, after the departure of the Lord from the vision of earthly people, when Arjuna was face to face with being vanquished in his acquired power and prominence, he wanted again to remember the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, just to teach all concerned that the Bhagavad Gita can be consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental agonies, but also for the way out of great entanglement which may embarrass one in some critical hour. The merciful Lord left behind him the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita so that one can take the instructions of the Lord even when he is not visible to materialize it. This is for all the human race, for each and every one. So Prabhupada is saying one can take the instructions of the Lord even when he is not visible to materialize it. Material senses cannot have any estimation of the Supreme Lord. But by his inconceivable power, the Lord can incarnate himself to the sense perception of the conditioned soul in a suitable manner through the agency of matter, which is also another form of the Lord's manifested energy. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita or any authentic scriptural sound representation of the Lord is also an incarnation of the Lord. There is no difference between the sound representation of the Lord and the Lord himself. One can derive the same benefit from the Bhagavad Gita as Arjuna did in the personal presence of the Lord. The faithful human being who is desirous of being liberated from the clutches of material existence can very easily take advantage of the Bhagavad Gita. And with this in view, the Lord instructed Arjuna as if Arjuna were in need of it. The Bhagavad Gita, 5 important factors of knowledge have been delineated pertaining to the Supreme Lord, the living entities, the nature, time and space, the process of activity. This is the 5 subject matters. Jiva, Prakriti, Ishvara, Kala and Karma. Out of these, the Supreme Lord and the living beings are qualitatively one. The difference between the two has been analyzed as the difference between the whole and the part and parcel. Nature is inert matter displaying the interaction of 3 different modes. The eternal time and the unlimited space are considered to be beyond the existence of the material nature. Activities of the living beings are different varieties of aptitudes which can entrap or liberate the living being within and without material nature. All the subject matters are concisely discussed in the Bhagavad Gita, and later the subject matters are elaborated in the Srimad Bhagavatam for further enlightenment. Out of the 5 subjects, the Supreme Lord, the living entity, nature and time and space are eternal. But the living entities, nature and time are under the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is absolute and completely independent of any other control. The Supreme Lord is the supreme controller. The material activity of the living being is beginningless, but it can be rectified by transferal into the spiritual quality. Thus, it can cease its material qualitative reaction. Both the Lord and the living entity are cognizant, and both have the sense of identification of being conscious as a living force. But the living being under the condition of material nature called the Mahatattva misidentifies himself as being different from the Lord. The whole scheme of Vedic wisdom is targeted to the aim of eradicating such a misconception and thus liberating the living being from the illusion of material identification. When such an illusion is eradicated by knowledge and renunciation, the living being revives his real identity as an individual being on the same transcendental platform as the Lord. As conscious beings, both the Lord and the living beings are responsible actors and enjoyers also. The sense of enjoyment in the Lord is real, but a sense in the living being is a sort of wishful desire only. But such a sense in the living being is a sort of wishful desire only. This difference in consciousness is the distinction of the 2 identities, namely the Lord and the living being. Otherwise, there is no difference between the Lord and the living being. The living being is therefore eternally one with the one and different simultaneously. The whole instruction of the Bhagavad Gita stands on this principle. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord and the living beings are both described as Sanatana or eternal, and the Lord's abode far beyond the material sky is also called Sanatana. The living being is invited to live in the Sanatana existence of the Lord, and the process which can help a living being to approach the Lord's abode, where the liberated activity of the soul is exhibited, is called Sanatana Dharma. One cannot, however, reach the eternal abode of the Lord without being free from misconception of material identification. And the Bhagavad Gita gives us the clue how to achieve this stage of perfection. The process of being liberated from the misconception of material identification is called in different stages: fruitive activity, empiric philosophy, and devotional service, up to transcendental realization. Such transcendental realization is made possible by dovetailing all of the above items in relation the Lord. Prescribed duties of the human being as directed in the Vedas can gradually purify the sinful mind of the conditioned soul and raise him to the stage of knowledge. This purified stage of acquiring knowledge becomes the basis of devotional service to the Lord. As long as one is engaged in researching the solutions of the problems of life, his knowledge is called Gyan or purified knowledge. But on realizing the actual solution of life, one becomes situated in the devotional service of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita begins with the problems of life by discriminating the soul from the elements of matter and proves by all reasons the argument that the soul is indestructible in all circumstances and that the outer covering of matter, the body and the mind, change for another term of material existence which is full of miseries. The Bhagavad Gita is therefore meant for terminating all different types of miseries, and Arjuna took the shelter of this great knowledge which had been imparted to him during the Kurukshetra battle. Hare Krishna. Now Suta Goswami is speaking. Suta Uvacha Evam Chintayato Jishnu Krishna Pada Saroruham Sohardena Ati Gadena Shantasit Vimalamati. Srila Suta Goswami said, thus being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in the great intimacy of relationship, friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pure, pacified, and free from all material contaminations. Arjuna was deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, that is Bhagavad Gita. And thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from all material contaminations. Since the Lord is absolute, deep meditation upon him is as good as yogic trance. So Arjuna went into transcendence. The Lord is not different from his name, form, qualities, pastime, entourage, and specific actions. Arjuna began to think of the Lord's instructions to him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only those instructions began to eliminate the tinges of material contamination in the mind of Arjuna. The Lord is like the sun, and the sun's appearance means immediate dissipation of darkness or ignorance. And the Lord's appearance within the mind of a devotee can at once drive away the miserable material effect. Lord Chaitanya has therefore recommended constant chanting of the names of the Lord for protection from all contamination of the material world. The feeling of separation from the Lord is undoubtedly painful to the devotees. But because it is in connection with the Lord, it has a specific transcendental effect which pacifies the heart. Feelings of separation are also sources of transcendental bliss, and they are never comparable to contaminated material feelings of separation. So this is what Arjuna did after Krishna left, and he was humbled. He lost to the infidel cowherds. He could not protect the queens of Dwarka. So he is feeling very, very guilty. Vasudeva Angri Anudhyana Paribramhita Rahamasa Bhaktya Nirmathita Ashesha Kasaya Thishana Arjuna. Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of the Lord Shri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion. And as a result, all the thrash of his thoughts subsidized. Very important. So Arjuna was contemplating on the lotus feet of the Lord. Material desires in the mind are the thrash of material contaminations. By such contaminations, the living being is faced with so many compatible and incompatible things that discourage the very existence of spiritual identity. Birth after birth, the conditioned soul is entrapped with so many pleasing and displeasing elements, which are all false and temporary. They accumulate due to the present reactions of material desires. But when we get in touch with the transcendental Lord and His variegated energies by devotional service, the naked forms of all material desires become manifest, and the intelligence of the living being is pacified in its true color. As soon as Arjuna turned his attention toward the instructions of the Lord, as they were inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita, his true color of eternal association with the Lord became manifest, and thus he felt freed from all material contaminations. This chapter has 51 verses. So another few days we will continue. I'll stop here. Feeling very tired, not able to concentrate, exhausted. Full week has been very, very hectic. It will continue till the time Marathon exists. Anyway, any discussion, any contributions, questions? Yes, Ramya?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare-
Prabhuji, in the verse number 27, in the purport it is written that when such an illusion is eradicated by the knowledge and renunciation, the living beings are responsible actors and enjoyer also. और इसके बाद का भी 2-3 लाइन मुझे समझ में नहीं आया प्रभु जी.
27th verse.
27th verse,
Big,
half
okay.
paragraph.
Yes.
When such an
Yeah.
illusion
See. Wait. The whole scheme of Vedic wisdom is targeted to the aim of eradicating. See, what happens is, you see how the living entity comes into this material world. When the living entity comes into this material world, what is the first gift that he gets? Is false ego. This is mentioned here. You see above. Both the Lord and the living entity are cognizant, and both have a sense of identification of being conscious of as a living force. But the living being under the condition of material nature called the Mahatattva misidentifies himself as being different from the Lord. Okay. Being different from the Lord means that he thinks to be enjoyer, he thinks to be proprietor. He wants to take the position of the Lord. The whole scheme of Vedic wisdom is targeted to the aim of eradicating such a misconception. What is the misconception? That he tries to take the position of controller, enjoyer, proprietor, and thus liberating the living being from the illusion of material identification. Is it clear so far?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, now gradually see. When such an illusion is eradicated by knowledge and renunciation, the living being revives his real identity as an individual being on the same transcendental platform as the Lord. What is the transcendental platform? Both are eternal, both are conscious. Prabhupada mentions, as conscious beings, both the Lord and the living being are responsible actors and enjoyers also. So on the spiritual platform, the eternal platform, the living being and the Lord are both responsible. Responsible means they know of their duty. What is the duty of the living entity? Is to serve the Supreme Lord. Right? Jivare Sarup hoy, Krishnera Nitya Das. And how this relationship is revoked? By performing devotional service. And when we perform devotional service, what do we experience? What is the experience? Bliss. Spiritual satisfaction. See, the sense of enjoyment in the Lord is real. But such a sense in the living entity being is a sort of wishful desire only. The difference in consciousness is the distinction of the two entities, namely the Lord and the living being. Otherwise, there is no difference between the Lord and the living being. The living being is therefore eternally one and different simultaneously. The whole instructions of Bhagavad Gita stands on this principle. So here, what is being said that the living entity also wants to be the enjoyer. So it has two situations. In the conditioned stage, it is forcefully trying to be the enjoyer, but it can never enjoy. Can it enjoy? It can never enjoy. It can only suffer. But in the spiritual platform, when he takes the real position and he performs service, then he can naturally enjoy. Prabhupada gives the example. Prabhupada gives 3 examples to illustrate how the jiva also naturally enjoys. One example Prabhupada gives is the car owner and the car driver. You remember? Car owner and the car driver. The car owner is like the Supreme Lord, and the car driver is compared to the jiva. So the car belongs to the owner. It does not belong to the driver. It is owned by the Lord or the proprietor. And whatever facilities are there in the car, it is enjoyed by the owner. But the facilities are also enjoyed by the driver. Yes or no? If the air conditioning is there in the car, is it so that the driver cannot enjoy? Only the master will enjoy? Or if there is a nice music system, only the master will hear and he will put a ear plug in the driver's ear? No. But when can he enjoy? Actually, when can the driver enjoy? When he is willing to follow the orders of the master. Then he naturally enjoys. Prabhupada gives the example of husband and wife. Prabhupada gives the example when the wife can naturally enjoy, when the husband is enjoying. So she will naturally enjoy. Yeah. So in this way, to the extent the living entity is in its constitutional position and it serves the Supreme Lord, so it will experience transcendental bliss, great enjoyment, satisfaction. But when it tries to replace the Supreme Lord and enjoy separately, then it suffers. Then it will suffer. Suffering is only due to being away from our real position of service and submission. So the entire point of Bhagavad Gita is focusing this only. You see, Prabhupada gives a very strong message in the preface. You have Bhagavad Gita, open the preface, very strong part. Preface is just 2.5 pages, but very deep preface. This is in the 3rd page. The paragraph begins with the Krishna consciousness movement is essential in human society. Got it? Dekho. I'll show you. One moment. This paragraph. The Krishna consciousness movement is essential in human society, for it offers the highest perfection of life. How this is so explained fully in the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, Mandal wranglers have taken advantage of Bhagavad Gita to push forward their demonic propensities and mislead people regarding right understanding of the same principles of life. Now comes the point. Everyone should know how God or Krishna is great, and everyone should know the factual position of the living entity. Everyone should know that the living entity is eternally a servant, and that unless one serves Krishna, one has to serve illusion in different varieties of the three modes of material nature, and thus wander perpetually within the cycle of birth and death. Even the so-called liberated Mayavadi speculator has to undergo this process. This knowledge constitutes a great science, and each and every living being has to hear it for his own interest. This is exactly what Prabhupada is explaining in the purport. And further also Prabhupada says, second. You see here. People in general, especially in the age of Kali, are enamored by external energy of Krishna, and they wrongly think that by advancement of material comfort, every man will be happy. They have no knowledge that the material or external nature is very strong, for everyone is strongly bound by the stringent laws of material nature. A living entity is happily the part and parcel of the Lord, and thus his natural function is to render immediate service to the Lord. By the spell of illusion, one tries to be happy by serving his personal sense gratification in different forms, which will never make him happy. Instead of satisfying his personal material senses, he has to satisfy the senses of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of life. The Lord wants this and he demands it. Very, very profound. Prabhupada says, the Lord wants this and he demands it. One has to understand this central point of Bhagavad Gita. Our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching the whole world this central point. So these are the explanations which Prabhupada is saying that this is what the Bhagavad Gita is. To remove knowledge, or to remove illusion by imparting knowledge. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? See, so much of glory is given of hearing. Everywhere in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, what is overemphasized again and again is the hearing, but how we have to hear with attention. We have to hear with heart. And when we are hearing, we should be very, very awake, very vigilant. And after hearing, we must contemplate. We must contemplate. Some mananam should be there. Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll stop here. We will resume tomorrow, Krishna willing. Who has the 11th chapter? Manoram Prabhu to present. Huh? So after I complete this chapter, 16th chapter, we will have one review of the 11th chapter and 12th chapter. 12th chapter is allotted to whom? I think Pradeep.
To me, Prabhuji.
12th is with you. Okay, whenever you find time, please prepare. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.